Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Looks like it's 1:31 and the majority of our registrants have tuned in, so maybe we'll get things started. My name's Grant Melnychuk. I'm Manager of Planning and Sustainable Development here at Manitoba Pork, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the fourth of our online producer engagement webinars. Today's session is Swine Production Research Updates. Just to give everyone a sense of how we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so. The main event this afternoon is a presentation on recent and ongoing swine-related research initiatives at the University of Manitoba. Before I hand it over to our guest speaker, I'd just like to set the table a little bit and provide a bit of context and a bit of background on Manitoba Pork's ongoing commitment to funding research and research institutions. There will be time at the end for questions and answers. Just to let folks know, the session is being recorded. We will be making it available on our website. So when you do ask your questions and answers, if you opt to do it verbally, just be advised that your voice will appear on the recording. The other option, of course, is to just simply type your questions into the chat box at the bottom. So I thought I'd start off just showing this slide because I think it paints a pretty good picture just as to the significance of Manitoba Pork's longstanding commitment in funding research and research institutions. Dating back to 1999, Manitoba Pork has committed in excess of $11 million towards research. Most recently, in 2020, Manitoba Pork committed $382,000 in change towards research. This year, we are budgeting to spend approximately $400,000 in 2021. And like I said, since 1999, this amounts to over $11 million, which is a significant sum in and of itself. But it's worth keeping in mind that when industry funds research projects such as we do, it often does lever additional funds from other funding sources. So that sum is likely much greater. Just a quick note on some of our key research partners. Of course, the University of Manitoba and the National Centre for Livestock and the Environment, who we will hear more from shortly. There's annual commitments that we provide to Swine Innovation Pork, as well as the Prairie Swine Centre out of the University of Saskatchewan. And a little closer to home, we provide some operational funding to the Lake Winnipeg Research Consortium. I just like to also acknowledge the folks that do the heavy lifting when it comes to carrying the research file here at Manitoba Pork, and those are the members of our Sustainable Development and Research Committee. There are 3 of our board of directors on the committee and 4 from our district advisor team. Committee is chaired by Rick Bergman. We also have Rick Preje and James Hofer from our board on the committee. And from the district advisors, Neil Booth, Sheldon Stott, Fred Fast, and Scott Rempel. And all of these folks are incredibly committed and dedicated and extremely knowledgeable when it comes to the issues facing the sector and how things might be solved by researching. Some of the roles include on an annual basis identifying and updating Manitoba Pork's research priorities. The committee proposes an annual research budget to the board of directors, as well as reviewing individual research proposals from time to time. So with that, that's the context I wanted to provide this session. I'm going to stop sharing my screen from here, and I will invite our guest speaker to share hers. And while she's doing that, I will provide a bit of an introduction to Christine Rawluk. Christine is the Research Development Coordinator for the University of Manitoba's National Centre for Livestock and the Environment, which is based out of the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences over at the University of Manitoba. As part of her role, Christine also coordinates and is an active contributor to a variety of knowledge extension activities to share research outcomes with both the ag industry and the general public. Christine is the lead for the new knowledge translation platform for the Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences, and this is called MAKE, M-A-K-E, the Manitoba Agriculture and Research Knowledge Exchange. So with that, welcome Christine, and take it away.
Thanks, Grant. Everyone can hear me, I hope. I should be unmuted. So thank you for the invitation to come and present to you today. We're fortunate to meet with the Sustainable Development and Research Committee annually to share the research that we're doing, but it's not often that we have an opportunity to have this sort of audience where we can communicate with you directly, the broader audience, about what we're doing. So that's just what I'll do today. So I thought I'd start with just an overview of what I'll be covering in our time together, just starting with the priorities that we tailor our research to address, what sort of capacity we have at the University of Manitoba to conduct the research addressing those priorities. Just an overview of the process that we go through in putting together proposals and executing on them, because I don't know if that's very well known. It just kind of shows how we're using your dollars to leverage greater funding for the research that we do. And then I'll get into some of the research projects that we have underway that are supported by Manitoba Pork, and some key outcomes of past research that we've done and how we're sharing the information coming out of that research. So this is tiny, I know, and the point of my showing it is just to show you that we're very much aware of Manitoba Pork's research priorities, and they guide the research that we conduct. And we are also very much aware of the research priorities of the other funding agencies that we're applying to. So for example, Swine Innovation Pork is one funding agency that's supporting a lot of our research along with Manitoba Pork. And so these research priorities are our starting point for developing our research ideas and figuring out what research we can be doing to address those priorities. So for example, we'll get into a lot of the research that we're doing, but around cost of production and feed efficiency, lots of work with the environment, specifically out of the National Center for Livestock and the Environment. So we start with the priorities that are put forward by industry, and then we look at our capacity. And you might think it's mostly animal sciences or animal scientists that are doing work related to pork, but that's not actually the case. There's a number of different departments that are involved in the research that we're doing. And also there's a diversity of skills or expertise even within a single department like animal science. There's the nutritionists, but then there's also modelers, and then there's those, the latest addition to our faculty is Megan King, and she brings a research program looking at animal health, behavior and welfare, and then also linking that in with quality of life for farmers. So that's a real kind of new avenue that animal science is moving towards, going into the social sciences a bit. But then there's also expertise in agricultural economics, in soil science for all the work that we do looking at manure nutrients, and biosystems engineering for work looking at barn environment and air quality, and then looking at the bioprocessing side of things. And then I also added in there at the end that we're also tapping into expertise outside of our faculty. So for example, Peter Pelka is partnering on one of the research projects that I'll be touching on later on in the talk. So very briefly, I'll just tell you a little bit about the process that we go through. So it all begins with a call for proposals. And those proposals are from the larger entities. Usually there's federal funding or provincial funding involved in it, such as the Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program, which is both federal and provincial funding, ANSERC, which is federal, and then of course the cluster programs, of which Swine Innovation Pork is one that has a mix of industry funding and federal government funding. And there's many others, but I just wanted to kind of give you a sample of where we start. So it starts, those larger entities, they either have an open call or they have a specific call for research proposals addressing their priorities. And from there, we get together with our researchers and they communicate amongst themselves within our faculty, but then also with other research experts across the country that have the kind of skill set that they need to conduct research addressing these priorities. So on our end, it starts with proposals that we put forward to Manitoba Pork, where we have just a description of the project, what it's about, why it's important, what priority area it's addressing, who's involved, so the different researchers involved on the project, or if there's other partners outside of research that are involved, and what is the budget and what larger funding program are we planning to apply to get, I guess, greater value out of the research dollars that we're asking Manitoba Pork to provide. So Manitoba Pork reviews our submissions, provides some feedback. Generally, the process has been that the feedback is usually quite positive and encouraging our researchers to go forward with the full proposal submission to the main funding program. And these larger funding programs, they have quite a rigorous review process to make sure that the research being proposed is feasible and the right experts with a good track record are the ones intending to do that research. So if the funding decision comes back that's positive, then we move forward with implementing the research. And so the funding that Manitoba Pork provides is absolutely critical for us to be able to apply to these programs and secure these larger dollars. Like the funding that Manitoba Pork provides allows us to double up to quadruple the amount of funding that we can put towards research, and research is expensive. It's usually multi-year. A lot of the programs are 3 to 5 years long. So the swine innovation cluster projects are generally 5 years in length. So they're quite costly. And if we didn't have the support from Manitoba Pork, we wouldn't have anywhere to go from there. We wouldn't be able to do the type of research that we are doing. So currently there are 12 projects underway that are related to swine research. 6 of them are funded in part by Manitoba Pork and 6 are funded through other avenues. So the ones in green there. So for example, the top one looking at soybeans as a feed source, that's funded by the Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers Association. We have some projects that are funded with Top Pigs Norseman working with our researchers and some other avenues. But really what I want to focus on today is the side that's in blue, and those are the projects taking place addressing your priorities that Manitoba Pork is supporting. So they cover the areas of production efficiencies, disease prevention, overall animal health. There's some research around environmental sustainability and the benefits of manure, and then research specifically looking at disease prevention. So in the area of cost production, productivity, and health, there's a series of projects looking at feed and feeding strategies with the aim of improving gut health, growth, and productivity, with the overall goal of reducing feed costs and reducing any excess nutrient excretion, because that's basically wasted feed that could be used for growth and performance by the pig. So research covered diet formulation strategies, co-product utilization, and how to get the best out of those co-products because of the limitations now on use of in-feed antibiotics. There's quite a body of research going on looking at antibiotic alternatives to ensure that piglets get a strong, healthy start when they're newly weaned. And then also research looking at novel feed additives, again, focusing on that pig gut health and making sure that pigs are robust and able to channel all their energy towards growth. So when I reached out to the researchers to say, well, why is this important? And they came back, of course, as you well know, feed cost is the #1 expense in pig production, and strategies are needed for alternatives to use of antibiotics. So I'll start with just some recently completed research conducted by Chengbo Yang out of the Department of Animal Science. And for all these examples, I'll just say that I'm only pointing to the research lead, but generally there is a team of about, I don't say 5 to 10 researchers, and then there are broader groups that are involved in conducting this research. And there are researchers across Canada, but I'm just highlighting the main principal researcher for each project. So this research specifically was looking at antibiotic alternatives with the use of essential oils and looking specifically at a way to coat the oils so that they can be delivered to the gut health, so that they could be used in the best possible means to promote pig gut health. So the research that they conducted resulted in the requirement for a lower dose of the essential oils because of the micro encapsulation method that they used. There's improved utilization efficiency of those nutrients, resulting in improved gut health, a reduction in pathogens. So overall, they saw an increase in the feed value and a reduction in the feed cost because of the lower amount of ingredient required. So this research was recently showcased in Better Pork magazine back in October 2020 in an article called "The Role of Essential Oils in Gut Health." And it's also featured on the Make Manitoba website that Grant referred to in the introduction, which is the faculty's new outreach site. And so there's a variety of funding sources here. This is just an example. In Manitoba Pork provides some seed funding, and in partnership with Jeffo Nutrition, there's greater funding secured through the federal program called NSERC. Another project led by Chengbo is looking at novel feed additives for gut health, again, as antibiotic alternatives, specifically looking at select probiotic bacteria to control enteric infections and improve gut health and performance of piglets. So this picture here is just a great example of the broader team. So there's a team of researchers, but then there's the actual people conducting the hands-on research and doing all the research write-ups, and those are typically grad students and technicians that are carrying out the actual projects. And so this is Chengbo Yang here, featured with a number of students that he had on his team. I think this was last year. So lots of students involved, and so that provides a great opportunity for student training in a variety of different skills to help position them for success in their future careers. So again, on another project related to antibiotic alternatives, this research specifically is looking at the capacity for red osier dogwood to provide some health benefits specific to alleviating oxidative stress and its associated health condition in weaning piglets. This project is funded through the Canadian Agricultural Partnership Program, and again, it's supported by Manitoba Pork, and it's being led by a team out of the University of Manitoba, Martin Niachoti, Chengbo Yang, and Carmen O. So that research is underway. I think it has a couple more years left to go. I should point out that for the most part, all of these projects, specifically the ones funded through Swine Innovation Pork, they tend to be longer in duration. Because it's a 5-year program, a number of these projects are 5 years in length. So we won't have full results until into 2023. So we have a few more years left to go. But as results come out, they are being shared. And this is one example here. So research looking at a shift away from antibiotic alternatives. Here we're looking at diet formulation and feeding strategies, focusing on the post-weaning period. And this research is led by Martin Niachoti. And the emphasis here is on what are the strategies that we can be using to reduce cost of production, so maximize profits and improve pig robustness. So getting back to the pig health. So specifically what they've discovered so far with this research is they've come up with a rapid low-cost method for detecting detoxifying vomitoxins, so mycotoxins in food, feed, and feed ingredients. And that would amount essentially to cost savings, an avenue for cost savings. And so that piece of technology is in the process of being patented and will hopefully be available for use in the near future. And so here's another example of just a number of individuals that are part of Martin Niachoti's team. So there's lots of people involved in this research, even though I'm just kind of showing you a few names at the top. Additional work looking at diet formulation and feeding strategies, this time focusing on growing finishing pigs, is looking specifically again at improving feed efficiency, reducing cost of production through optimizing feed formulations, and making sure that those the nutrients that those ingredients provide are being used as efficiently as possible, so that there's also that reduced risk to the environment. So they're looking at a variety of different ingredients and methodologies, such as novel ingredients, alternative feed crops based on what's grown in Canada, looking at different processing strategies and feed enzymes, just again to improve how those nutrients are used to reduce overall feeding cost and increase the benefit of feeding these ingredients. So just some highlights for the work that they've done so far. is looking specifically at processing conventional soybean meal using heat. And with that work, they determined that by adding that processing piece of it, the meal became the meal through that process was a better protein source with a higher nutritional profile as compared to the conventional soybean meal. And if you're wondering what that picture is there, those are the chambers that are set up in Martin Iatoti's laboratory, where they're able to they'll put a pig inside that chamber, and they'll be able to do detailed measurements just by what the pig is exhaling and the weight of the pig. So it allows them to do very detailed measurements non-invasively on single animals. Shifting gears a little bit, looking at some different suite of priorities put forward by Manitoba Pork. This project specifically is looking at environmental sustainability and stewardship priorities of Manitoba Pork. This research is led by Mario Tenuta around establishing the environmental footprint of pig production in Canada today, based on current production practices. And so that we'll be doing a life cycle assessment and also doing case studies to determine working with individual farms across Canada to determine which production practices have the greatest footprint benefit. So that research, as indicated, is underway, and you might have received some notices or seen some notices sent out by Grant and Manitoba Pork, encouraging people to take part in the National Pig Production Practices Survey that we put out there. So the survey itself, why do we need this information? It's so that we can make sure that we're basing the footprint assessment on actual production taking place on farms today, and representative of the types of barns and production systems that are in place in Canada, as opposed to using an existing data set that could perhaps be imported from somewhere else and not necessarily representative of what's happening on Canadian farms. So the latest edition of Canadian Hog Journal that came out just winter 2021 that also happened to do a lovely profile of Andrew Dixon's long career with Manitoba Pork. We also had an article featuring this footprint analysis project and highlighting the survey and what's involved in completing the survey. So we're working with the provincial pork organizations to promote the survey among their membership. The survey itself takes about 40 minutes to complete and requires information around in-barn management, the barn environment, water and energy use, feed, housing, and manure management. It's not a simple 5-minute survey. It does take some time, but the information that you would provide in completing the survey is of incredible benefit, and it really is needed for this project to succeed. So we're targeting 400 completed surveys, and it has been a pretty tough slug. We're not quite halfway there yet. And for example, in Manitoba itself, I think we launched it late last fall. And to date, we've received 12 completed surveys specifically just for Manitoba. And we've had a number of completes from some other provinces, but the numbers are still quite a bit lower than they need to be. So please, I'll continue working with Grant to make sure that we're promoting the survey in a few different ways, and hopefully we'll see some more completes. So please consider taking part in the survey. And then the last project I wanted to feature was another project involving Mario Tenuta, working closely with the virologist Peter Pelka out of the Department of Microbiology. Specifically looking at the survivability and infectivity of porcine epidemic diarrhea virus in soil. And they're conducting lab-based studies to look at the effects of different soil types and conditions on the survivability and infectivity of the virus in soil, so that producers can have a better handle of knowing once the manure is applied to the field, how long is it before that it is really safe to go on that field, and there's a low, very low or no risk of that virus being transmitted into the growing crop and being circulated back into the food system. So that research has just started this year. And right now, the work hasn't fully started in the lab. Peter is sourcing the virus to begin the lab work, and work is being done around developing biosafety protocols since it is working with a virus. We have to make sure that we do some extra safety measures. So shifting gears just a little bit, Grant asked me to share some examples of research impact. So I kind of looked back at some of the things that we've been involved with in the last number of years. I've been at the university for over 12 years now, working specifically with the National Center for Livestock and the Environment. So I've basically been drawing on the research that I've been a part of or been aware of during my time with nickel. So the examples I'm sharing will cover manure and nutrient management, feed ingredients, and feed additive characterization and evaluation. So work that Martin Yachody and Chengbo Yang are involved in, and sow group housing transition tools and resources going back to a few years back when there's a great amount of research being done around making sure that producers had the tools that they needed to be able to make sound decisions when considering converting from conventional housing into sow group housing. So looking at manure management, of course, this goes back a number of years as well with its change in regulations, shifting to phosphorus-based nutrient management regulations. There's a large number of research projects that we were involved in, looking at ways that we can be continuing in this changed regulatory environment in terms of applying manure to the land and capturing those beneficial nutrients from that manure and seeing the value of manure as fertilizer. So the main outcome that came from over 10 years of research that took place at the National Center for Livestock and the Environment long-term study site, which is shown here in this picture, where we looked at a different manure management and cropping system management. The main outcome is that management that matches combined manure and soil nutrient supply with crop production needs is the most viable strategy for environmentally and economically sustainable manure management. So focusing specifically on application of manure to nutrient deficient soils. Don Clayton, who led this research for a number of years, liked to say there's not a phosphorus surplus problem, there's a phosphorus distribution problem. And that's really what this research is showing, that if you manage manure nutrients properly, they don't need to be a problem. And so the value of this research is that it provided the evidence that manure nutrients are a valuable source of nutrients, and there is minimal environmental risk when properly managed following the 4R nutrient management principles, which are applying the right product in the right place, at the right amount, and at the right time. And whether that's synthetic fertilizer or manure fertilizer, those 4R's principles still hold. And so having this evidence is kind of, I'd say, a weapon in your arsenal to go forward and say that producers are doing a good job, and that this is a sound management strategy compared to some of the other management strategies that were evaluated that were just not feasible, such as a variety of different manure treatment technologies that ended up being cost prohibitive. So, and this research, I know that Dawn and other researchers at the university spoke in favor of this body of research as a way of shifting from having a moratorium on expansion of operations and building of new barns, because there now is this evidence that the manure could be managed soundly and without risk to the environment. So looking at specifically the research around nutritional values and characterization of feed ingredients to reduce cost of production and optimize productivity and animal health. A number of products have been evaluated, including a number of byproducts like canola meal, camelina cake, DDGs, flaxseed meal, and oat hulls. An example of how we're communicating the research outcomes from this work is shown here. So this is an infographic that we've developed that's on our Make Manitoba website, where it kind of encapsulates all the research that's taken place around canola meal. So it shows the different levels of inclusion for feeding to swine. It shows the nutrient composition of the canola meal, and it speaks to the specific benefits of canola meal, as well as the tremendous value of to the canola industry of using canola as a meal for feeding to swine. So then shifting gears a little bit and looking at specifically at antibiotic-free production, we covered some of those early results from the research that's just recently completed or still underway, specific to antibiotic alternatives and looking at feed processing for feed safety and feed storage for feed safety. And here I'm just showing another example of the type of information pathways that we're sharing the results of our work. So this is a fact sheet around optimizing gut health for swine in antibiotic-free production. And it kind of captures some of the research that has gone into these recommendations or different approaches for seeking antibiotic alternatives. And that also is available on our MAKE website at makemanitoba.ca if you wanted to take a closer look at it. And then lastly, I want to touch on research that Laurie Connor was involved in, working as well with Chong Zhang in biosystems engineering, and working very closely with Manitoba Pork and then with other entities across Canada to help develop this suite of resources to use for producers to use when trying to make decisions around what type of group housing system to convert their existing barn into. So there's a variety of resources that were put out, this guidebook. And then there was a conversion design utility suite. There was a program to use, and kind of you input your current barn data, and it would provide different options for group housing. And then of course there's the National Sow Housing Project that Laurie was quite involved with before her retirement. So those are just some examples. As we find out results from our research, we try to share it in a variety of different formats, whether it's through industry magazines like Better Pork or Canadian Hog Journal, or industry-focused events like the Manitoba Swine Seminar, or the Prairie Livestock Expo, or the Banff Pork Seminar. We also take advantage of a number of online strategies for sharing the research that we're doing. And as you might have guessed, what's become really popular in the last year is these audio interviews and having materials and available through online channels, since there's not as much of the in-person, well, there's none of the in-person events taking place this year. And then of course our research is published in peer-reviewed scientific journals, and that is a very critical pathway for putting it out in the public domain, so that the research it shows that the research has been vetted and is accepted by the peers in that research community. And then I just wanted to touch briefly on kind of what you might find on our new outreach site, the Manitoba Agriculture and Food Knowledge Exchange. So we're sharing research through a variety of different avenues, such as podcasts, the Make podcast that you can follow on Spotify if you like. Check out the podcast that we have there. We're conducting a number of videos. The faculty has launched what we call a conversation series, where we have researchers coming together and talking about the work that we're doing, or we have researchers and their partners in the community that they're working with, just sharing their research results and kind of having a conversation with the viewing audience. We also have a variety of articles and fact sheets and infographics, like I've shown you throughout this talk on the website, and even recipes, which I'll show you right away. And so there's kind of a dual purpose to this outreach site. We're sharing information specific to the ag sector, where there might be some resources that would be of use, such as beneficial management practices and that sort of information. But then really we're also just wanted to reach the broader general public, to share some of the work that we're doing and hopefully increase their understanding of the way we grow and produce food in Manitoba, and who's involved in that on the ground and in the research environment. So we have a few specific examples of material that would be suitable for or of relevance to swine producers, and I've kind of shown them throughout the presentation. And then just another one to highlight is this podcast around antimicrobial use in Canadian livestock, and that was provided by the province's poultry specialist, Amy Johnston, where she talks about some of the changes in regulations and some research advancements around antibiotic alternatives. So that's really important information to get out to the general public, because I think there's just a lot of confusion around antimicrobial use in livestock production. So it's good just to have that so that folks that are interested can seek out that information if they so choose. And then I just wanted to also share this kind of a novel avenue that we're pursuing is looking at pairing simple to make recipes with some research information. So on the flip side of that stir fry recipe is a summary of research that we're doing around food footprints and looking at it both from the livestock production piece of it and the crop production piece of it. So right now we're sharing some results of the beef footprint work that was led out of our faculty. Hopefully in the future, we can add in some of the footprint work for the pig production in the province for that research that we're doing. So that's really all I had. Thank you for your time. And of course, I'll be happy to take some questions, or if you have specific questions about the projects that I've shown, I might then redirect you to one of our researchers so that you'll get a more comprehensive answer. So if you have some questions, let me know, and I think I'll take this down.
Okay, well, that was great, Christine. Thank you so much for that. It's a great presentation, not only on the research that's underway, but also the outreach and knowledge transfer that's going on at the university. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
There have been a couple of questions that came in, and I encourage anyone else on the line to feel free to put some questions in chat or ask them, but maybe I will get started here. Got a question, wondering how COVID has impacted the ongoing research projects, either in terms of timelines or just challenges dealing with on-farm or in-lab research activities.
I really appreciate that question, because I think we well know that COVID has touched every aspect of our lives, and research is no exception. And thankfully, everyone was able to carry on their research, but not without a tremendous amount of paperwork. And I would say just additional costs because of the added requirements to ensure that the protocols that the university has put in place were followed. So I'm working from home, and I have been since March, and anyone who doesn't have to physically be on campus is working from home. So it is the technicians and the grad students and the researchers that are doing research in the lab and in the field that are on campus right now, and just when they have to be. And there were a number of special permissions that had to take place for that to be able to happen, and assurances that safety protocols could be followed. So for example, anyone doing field research, everyone had to travel out in their own vehicles, so there can be no doubling up of occupancy. So that adds an additional cost, and there's just greater coordination. So it has shifted back our timelines on a number of projects. Also, if we're considering students, making sure that we have our students here able to do the work. We have a number of international students, so there's additional challenges there. But yes, happy to report that all the research is proceeding. It's just that the timelines have been somewhat delayed in some instances. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. We have another one here. It was mentioned that there was a new faculty member in animal science, Dr. King. What will her research priorities likely be?
Yeah, so she's very new. She just started in January. She just was finishing up her research coming out of Guelph. And I know she's put in she put in a proposal to Swine Innovation Pork with their latest call. She's really interested in kind of animal health, but also farmer well-being and mental health, and really looking at the role that technology can play in improving the lives of both, I guess you could say, the animals and farmers themselves. So she's bringing this social sciences aspect that is is newer to our faculty. You know, we're kind of the hard sciences and looking at things through that analytical lens. And so we're excited with her addition because she brings kind of this different perspective, and I think very much needed attention and emphasis around farmers. You know, COVID has just taken a tremendous toll on farmers, or any time that there's a disruption in markets that impacts like farmers right at the ground level. And so it's very exciting that she's really interested in that pathway of research, and seeing what she can do to help make things better when things aren't great, I guess you could say.
Definitely. Okay, thanks for that one. Okay, one more that came in. So much great research, so much being done in terms of knowledge transfer as well. I think you might have touched on some of this when you got into your research impact slides. But are there any mechanisms that can be added to help get producers to adopt and implement the research findings on their farms? Particularly, is there anyone that should be helping cheerlead this cause?
I would say we would look to you to help us cheerlead that. I know that a number of our researchers work directly with Manitoba Pork staff. So whether it's Janelle Hamblin or Mark Finn, or I know just a recent graduate of our faculty just joined your team, Ria Teranishi. So looking at making sure that we have those strong relationships so that when our research outcomes are fresh, your people are aware of it, and they can take that message out to producers and do their part to help encourage uptake. And the same thing with working with provincial specialists. You know, I know that our researchers and Manitoba Pork representatives, as well as provincial specialists, they're on these decision-making committees, say for example around the swine seminar planning committee. And so making sure that we are continually sharing our latest research with those specialists that are kind of more on the ground dealing with producers is probably our best avenue. And then, you know, looking at ways that we can capitalize on the venue that we have out at Glenlee Research Station with the Farm and Food Discovery Center, that in having the viewing windows into the swine production unit there, that provides that opportunity to be kind of showcasing what could be happening in barn that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do on a commercial farm just because of biosecurity concerns. But you know, I'm open to if there are suggestions or recommendations out there for ways that we could be better connecting with you about the research that we're doing. I'd be happy to hear those and see what we can be doing to improve that. You know, in ways it's easier on the crop side because there's all these field days in the summer that the different commodity groups host. And so our researchers go out and stand in the field and talk about the work that we're doing, but that's a little bit more challenging when we're talking about livestock production.
Exactly, yeah, in a biosecurity environment. Okay, those are the 3 questions that have come in via chat. I mean, at this point, we're closing on the 45 minutes that we were targeting, but I would encourage anyone, if they have any additional questions, to either pipe up now or put them in the chat. Seeing none, what I'd also like to do before we sign off is just put in a plug for the next 2 of our producer engagement webinars. On February 9th, we have one on agriculture education. And on March the 2nd, we have one on biosecurity initiatives and programming. So stay tuned for the web invitations to those. And just looking, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. So with that, I would like to thank you, Christine, for your presentation. That was really informative and really great. I'd like to thank everyone who has tuned in to us with us this afternoon. And with that, I think we can call it quits for the seminar. Hope everyone stays warm and has a good rest of the day and rest of the week.